They're not changing what I learn, but more how I experience it. For me, and probably for other autistic people, communication isn't as important. We see ourselves as individuals rather as parts of a group. Tell people when you have a problem. Don't just think you can solve it by yourself. Try to communicate why you can't handle something.
Welcome to the Metautism podcast, where we're diving into the vibrant world of autism and championing inclusive education and employment. Join us as we explore innovative strategies, share inspiring stories, and analyze groundbreaking initiatives that celebrate differences and advocate for a future of equal opportunities. Let's get started. Hello. How are you? Welcome to another episode of Metautism podcast. Today is a very special day. We're celebrating World Autism Awareness Day. It's the day where people all around the world gather and hope to shine a bit more light on autism and related topics to raise awareness and to make our society a bit more understanding, acceptable, inclusive and diverse. I'm your host, Clara, and today I have young but very inspiring guest. Here with me is Domagoj Jurčić. He's a student of mechanical engineering at University of Slavonski Brod. And he is the first person with Asperger syndrome in his region, basically, and on that university to go to college, and he's doing very well. And I'm happy that today we will have the opportunity to listen to his story and find out more about his interests. Domagoj, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We can give a bit more introduction about Asperger syndrome. I believe there are many people who are just finding out what that is. And Asperger syndrome is a high-functioning form of autism where individuals lack some social skills one is expected to have. I also listened to different people with Asperger syndrome and I recognized some patterns. For example, they have a gap between what's in their mind. Their mind is very vivid, very active, but the gap is how they communicate with the world. Also, as young children, they struggle to fit socially. For example, when their colleagues or peers said some jokes, they couldn't understand them so well. Also, they didn't have many or any friends. They were unfortunately bullied in school. They have a form of hypersensitivity, etc. So now I want to see, how do you see yourself compared to those descriptions?
I've always perceived Asperger's syndrome as a learning disability that alters a person's perspective. As in, I see things much more differently than other people. For example, I consider communication not as important as normal human beings, since for human beings, communication is the most important tool they have. It's a survival mechanism and they need to develop quickly in order to survive. But for me, and probably for other autistic people, communication isn't as important. We see ourselves as individuals rather as parts of a group or a herd. And as such, we specifically develop individual skills for isolated survival. So to us, being alone is as problematic as being forced to be in a group.
So you definitely prefer more alone time than spending time with others, yeah?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I also saw an example from your college. Let's say you have maybe some task and you're not sure how to do that task. You won't ask for help. However, if you know how to do task, you will fully immerse yourself in it.
Yes, well, as I said earlier, it's a survival mechanism. And as such, I believe autistic people develop a sort of isolationism. Let's say we see ourselves as different, and as such, we develop to survive alone. I myself don't ask for help since I consider it that if I can't do something by myself, I shouldn't be the one to be doing it. That responsibility shouldn't be on my shoulders.
However, for example, you are highly skilled at some logical tasks. I know you are very well in maths, that some other people are not good at.
It's more of a difference between internal conceptualization and external, since most people consider seeing their outside world as more important to realize, whereas myself and probably other autistic people and some people consider the inside of their own mind is a more important thing to realize and figure out. And as such, we spend more time inside our own heads, figuring out how we work and how we can solve our own problems.
Mm-hmm. Could you maybe describe me one thought process, or for example, we will later mention Warhammer, one game that you like to play. So what does your thought process looks like when you are playing the game?
Well, when I play the game, I don't really think about it. It's just more of a subconscious process. And how do I put it? And yes, a lot of things are subconscious processes, and we don't consider. We just it's sort of like how normal people can just communicate without thinking. They explain things. And understand each other without having to think about it. By that same logic, autistic people, myself included, we ponder and think about various abstract concepts within our own heads without even considering it. It just comes second nature to us.
You were diagnosed in 7th grade in Croatia, that is around 13 years old. So can you maybe tell us the story of your days in primary school and also in high school?
Mostly I was very isolated from other kids. I didn't consider much of it, since I just thought that that's natural. I'm different, and I didn't really know why I was different from them. I just accepted it as fact and just didn't think about it. And I was fine with it, since I didn't really enjoy spending time with other kids. They were too loud, they were too rowdy, they were too energetic. They ran around screaming, and that bothered me. I don't know how to explain that other than just saying it like that.
Mm-hmm. What was your relationship with teachers?
Very good. I listened to the teacher. I just wanted to, I just liked listening and learning new things, as I thought it was interesting I always like when I learn something new, something I didn't know before, and to accept that information and to see how it connects to everything I know before, how it leads to me learning about new things about things I already know.
You went in high school at Technical School Slavonski Brod. Now you are third year of mechanical engineering. How did you decide to go for mechanical engineering?
Whenever I look at something, I was always fascinated by how it functions, how each of these individual components fits together as a whole to create something new, something more than the sum of its parts. And so, to me, learning about how things function and how I can make these things function and repair them, it seemed fitting for me. I wanted to learn more and how to apply these skills.
What attracted you to mechanical engineering? Why mechanical engineering? We can also say maybe that you can see how things function in some other fields.
Well, because mechanical engineering is about the most simplest of machines possible. As the point of the machines that we work with, lathes and mills, are basically just you take a tool, a hard tool, and you make it spin really fast. And that's as basic as I can explain. I like that. I like that simplicity. Yeah, and these simplistic tools, just spin really fast. They are used to create some of the most complex components that we have in things. CNC lathes and mills are used to create pieces for supercars, for rockets, or computers for everything. And the machines that do this are just an electric engine that spins a piece of metal around. It's interesting to me.
In one interview, you said you would like in future work on bionic limbs or robotic limbs or something like that. Is that still your interest, or did you find something new you're even more interested in?
I love bionics, but considering my lack of general talent, I feel it's more fitting to be. I consider being a teacher's assistant, since being around the professors at the faculty and the faculty on the college would help me learn more, and every moment I spend around them would help me learn more about the field and more about the world we live in. So I consider that it'd be more important for me to spend some time as a teacher before, or I even bothered even going to bionics, since bionics is just a dream job. It's not an actual job that I could hold for very long, since real jobs require a great deal of social and political manipulation. Every single moment that you spend, just getting a job requires for you to know the right people, to tell him the right things, and to or look the right way for him to accept you. And that's just very difficult for me. So yeah, I doubt I'd ever nail a job in an interview for some high-tech company that's working in bionics.
Maybe some smaller tech company.
Probably, maybe.
And then you get higher and higher in your position.
Yeah.
Well, how did your parents influence your life and way of thinking?
It was mostly my father, but my mother supported me greatly in everything, since she is kind and nurturing, and as such, she allowed me here to accept that failure is just a natural part, and not to worry. She reduced a great deal of stress from my life, whereas my father, he basically molded me into understanding that responsibility and effort are the most important things you can have, and trying and failing is better than not trying at all. So to me, my father is a very hardworking individual who devotes his entire life to just doing something that helps other people, and as such, I always looked up to him. I always consider him a great person.
And your mother also, she's very, very supportive. And did I get it correct that she was the one who did all the checking if you could get into college, or how could you participate in classes and so on?
Yes, she was very important. She handles all of the communication problems that I can't handle by myself, since I have a great deal of problems with communication and understanding between people and such. She handles those problems, since knowing that I couldn't handle it, I just ignored them and just wouldn't even bother trying them. Whereas my mother doesn't accept that and strives to make sure that I have the opportunity that every other person.
Also, regarding communication on college in your classes, there is Nikolina Bilangia, and she's your assistant. So how does your relationship and communication work?
It's great, mostly because she does the same thing my mother is currently doing. She sees when I have a problem with communication, where I choose not to converse with other people, and as such takes up that communication as an intermediate for somebody to understand both sides and to sort of bridge the gap between us. And that helps a lot, since a lot of my problems come to me from me refusing to explain to other people when I have a problem and I can't handle something. When I can't handle something, I just don't do it. I avoid it, and such. Other people speaking on my name to explain how I have these problems and how I can't handle things by myself. That helps a great deal in letting me live a more normal life.
When we are speaking about your life with your mother and your father, I heard that you also like animals, that you connect with animals very well. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's just human communication is very, very different than animal communications. For example, eye contact. In human beings, eye contact is mandatory. It's a sort of sign of trust. Whereas with animals, eye contact is a sign of aggression. You look at an animal in the eye and it's assuming that you are questioning its authority, that you're trying to attack it. And as such, it's more of a difference in perspective. To me, being looked at means I have attention I am receiving attention I don't want. I feel in danger from being the center of attention. The same as animals. As such, to me, animals are more sympathetic to me than human beings. So we have this more similar mindset. We're in an unfamiliar environment surrounded by individuals we don't understand and we have trouble communicating with, and I have a limited means of communication. So it's more sympathetic to me, an animal is more sympathetic than other people. Although I still bond a great deal with animals, so it's not that big of a gap between me and other people.
Could you maybe also tell us how did pandemic and the online classes, what influence did they have on you?
When I learn something, I learn the best example from a combination of examples and explanations. And as such, when we couldn't see the professors in person, and that caused a greater rift into me and my learning. Seeing the professor on the screen compared to seeing the professor in person, that didn't feel real. I didn't feel like I was in class. I felt like I was just at home. Since to me, just being in a classroom, that's a completely different world. A world where I'm learning, where I'm listening, where I'm doing tasks, and as such, being forced to do that same work at home in my own bedroom, that didn't feel appropriate. I didn't feel like I was learning. I felt like just watching some sort of podcast on the internet instead of just being in class. So, yeah.
It wasn't so materialized, tangible as when you are in classes, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
You go to your classes by train, yeah?
Yes.
So how is that experience also being with other people?
At first it was a problem, but to me it just became habit to understand that there are a lot of other people. But because my father worked on a train station since I was a small child, I got used to trains very quickly. I grew up in the liked trains. I understood them a lot. So to me, trains are just natural, something you need to understand. And as such, to me, the train ride itself isn't a problem, but the hordes of other kids ramming into the train and trying to get seats that always bother me. But over time, I got used to it. It just became a natural part of my cycle to see dozens of other kids ramming into, climbing to the train and trying to get seats. So I just got used to it.
Mm-hmm. What I noticed, you maybe form an environment for yourself. You have a class environment, you have home environment, you have a public transport environment,
yes.
And that's how you maybe compartmentalize
yes.
those aspects of your life.
Yes, yeah. It gets a lot easier when you just consider it as different rooms with different rules. At home, I just get to laze around and do what I want, but and occasionally help my parents if they ask me for it. At the school or at college, I need to listen to the professors. I need to pay attention to what they're saying and to make sure that I understand what they're saying. And at the train, I need to go from one place to the other without paying much attention. And it's such compartmentalizing it like that. And it takes out a lot of the stress but in order to do that, I needed time to adjust, time to learn how these rooms function and what rules they have and possess.
You also mentioned that you are listening to podcasts. Are you listening, or is that just a comparison?
More of a comparison. Although I do watch one for Warhammer, the game, I believe.
Maybe we can then talk about Warhammer.
Yes.
That is a tabletop. That is a miniature tabletop war game with medieval fantasy theme. Is that correct?
Warhammer Fantasy is the one for with fantasy elements. Warhammer 40k, the one I play, is sci-fi and futuristic.
So, how did you get into Warhammer 40k?
Well, I found a website talking about how to for discussing and cataloging various tabletop games such as Settlers of Catan and other things. And I found that they listed a bunch of things about the Warhammer 40k. They had pages and pages, hundreds of pages for each unit, each weapon, each character, each planet, each setting, every single story, all cataloged. And I just kept reading and reading. I found the setting more and more interesting. And I wanted to learn more, and eventually I got into the hobby. I bought myself some figures. I glued them together. I painted them, and I just wanted more. It's an addiction. It's a plastic addiction.
Yeah. How long does it last now?
Probably 2 years. I started last or the year before that.
And how does that process look like? Do you play it alone? Do you need to have someone else to play it?
It's played with 2 players. Specifically, it's played by each player collecting miniatures of soldiers after specific armies. They take these miniatures and they paint them according to whatever they want, and as such, they then choose which army they want, and each army has its own rules and the specific units which have their own specialized rules, and as such, they build the army they want. If they want an army with a lot of tanks, they have a lot of tanks. If they want an army with a lot of infantry, they get a lot of little miniatures of little toy soldiers that walk around. Then 2 players find the time and find a room with a big table, and then they set up a table with terrain pieces, and then they spend several hours playing against each other, and then eventually they just either get bored of it or it's just spend so much time that eventually somebody wins it. So it's an interesting game. It's fun to play. It's just that getting into it is a very tedious and expensive process. But after you get into it, it's quite a lot of fun.
It definitely needs a lot of dedication, of course. Yeah, I also know that you like languages. In one interview, you said you like Japanese.
Yeah, I spent some time trying to learn Japanese, but I gave up. It's more of a difference in the thought process. Since the Japanese language is heavily rooted in their culture, it's just too much of a gap between the way I think and they think for me to completely catch up with the language. So I gave up on that.
Yeah, I also like very much Japanese and Japanese culture, but I completely understand you with all the contexts of one word or a simple word having completely different meanings depending on the scenario, so it can be quite a challenge. Maybe now we can see, did I miss anything? Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes, for Warhammer 40k, I specifically joined a club in this town. It used to be a club for miniatures and war games and modeling, but as the older members started retiring, it changed into a board game club. But some of the older members and some of the newer members are still playing Warhammer, and such. I joined without knowing that the club became entirely about board games. But as I joined, some of the older members came back and are still playing with me. Specifically, we're in the middle of a sort of tourney that is in the Warhammer, where each of us has our own army and we're all playing against each other to see who wins the most points.
Okay, so how long will that last?
I don't know, probably a year.
A year.
We haven't played an entire month since, well, we had 2 games and they were a month apart, and since then we haven't played at all. So it's more of a scheduling problem. And the club that I joined, Pannonia Minor English, is entirely about board games. Now, I occasionally go to them and play various board games with them, and when they're and they have every Sunday they have a game day where they gather up and everybody some people bring games and they play it in groups. So it's very interesting, especially since most people don't really learn the rules before coming. So we're all learning as we're playing.
That's amazing. Then maybe we can conclude the interview and by asking you this question. So, is there any message you would like to share with other people, especially those with Asperger syndrome?
Yes. Tell people when you have a problem, don't just think you can solve it by yourself. Try to communicate why you can't handle something, why something is a problem. People are more understanding than you might think, especially your parents. A lot of kids have problems with it, their parents not understanding them, but it's sort of a problem with preconception, and kids see their own parents as entirely separate beings, as they exist in an entirely completely different dimension. But that's not true. The parents had the same problems we had, not exactly the same, but similar ones, and as such, they can sympathize, they can understand us, and as such, it's our duty as children, as their children, to communicate to them what we can handle and to ask them for help.
So maybe we can now make a small conclusion of this episode. You have a form of your own functioning, but you advocate for trying to understand that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to say this is not okay or this is okay. Did I get that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And that you can, even with maybe some communication challenges, go to college, go to, of course, high school, and function in society by simply learning to adjust. For example, we mentioned trains.
Yeah, not just that, but to get people to understand and then sympathize with your problems. A big part of why it went this far is because the professors at the college that I go to are very understanding and try as hard as they can to reach out to me, to understand my situation and to help me. They put in a lot of effort to understand my plights and my problems and to see what they can do for me to have as normal an experience as possible for a student.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's very nice of them. And I think I read that when they learned you're coming to their college, they went to get a bit more education on how to communicate with you. You're doing everything else, and that's of course important to mention, as any other student.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of the point. And they're explaining how they're putting as much effort as possible to make sure that I'm just another student, and they're not changing what I learned, but more how I experience it. They're not altering the end result or the process, but rather how I experience the process. And such it's helping a lot for me when they help so much. When he puts so much effort into understanding me and my perspective. So yeah, it's a great help.
That's an excellent message. So Domagoj, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, dear listener, for listening to this episode, and thank you to the Erasmus Plus program of European Union for funding this project. All opinions are our own. Please hit subscribe or follow on YouTube or your favorite listening platform so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Until the next time, bye bye!